The great warship Eternal Silence floated in the darkness between stars. It was the largest ship ever built by the HFY Dominion, a vessel so massive that smaller ships could dock inside its hangars like fish swimming into the mouth of a whale. For 800,000 years, the HFY had conquered the universe. They had destroyed over 10,000 species. They had burned worlds and stolen suns, and they had never, not once, known defeat. High Admiral Vorthax stood at the center of the council chamber, his scales gleaming under the cold blue lights. He was old, even by HFY standards, and his body carried the scars of 100 wars. Around him sat the 12 members of the High Council, each one a conqueror in their own right, each one responsible for the deaths of billions. The target is called Earth, Vorthax said. His voice was deep and carried no emotion. A small planet in a small system at the edge of the galaxy. The dominant species calls themselves humans. A hologram appeared above the council table. It showed a blue and green world, beautiful in its simplicity. White clouds swirled across its surface. Oceans sparkled under a yellow sun. They are primitive, Vorthax continued. They have only recently left their planet. Their ships are slow. Their weapons are weak. They fight among themselves constantly. They pose no threat to the Dominion. Council member Thaxrin leaned forward. She was younger than the others, ambitious and cruel. Then why do we waste time discussing them? Send a cleansing fleet. Burn their world. Move on. That is exactly what I propose, Vorthax replied. Standard extermination protocol. We will need perhaps 50 ships. The operation will take less than one rotation. The council members nodded. This was routine. They had done this countless times before. Some species surrendered and became slaves. Others resisted and became dust. The universe belonged to the HFY, and everyone else existed only by their permission. Vorthax was about to call for the vote when the chamber doors slid open. A young HFY rushed in, her scales pale with fear. She was an archivist, one of the thousands who maintained the Dominion's vast libraries of conquered knowledge. Forgive me, High Admiral, she said, bowing low. I would not interrupt if it were not urgent. Vorthax's eyes narrowed. Speak quickly, archivist. Your life depends on the importance of your words. The young female held up a small crystal, no larger than her finger. It glowed with a soft purple light. This was recovered from the ruins of the Aelthori homeworld. Our translators have finally decoded it. You must hear what it says. The mention of the Aelthori sent a murmur through the council. The Aelthori had been a mystery for nearly 1,000,000 years. They had been the most advanced species ever known, capable of wonders the HFY still could not understand. And then, without warning, they had vanished. No war, no disaster. They simply ceased to exist. The HFY had found their empty cities and studied their abandoned technology. But they had never learned why the Aelthori disappeared. Play the message, Vorthax commanded. The archivist placed the crystal on the council table. It hummed for a moment, and then a voice filled the chamber. It was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It spoke in perfect HFY. Though the Aelthori had died long before the Dominion was born. We have seen all futures, the voice said. We have looked into every possibility that time allows. We leave this warning for whoever finds it. In a distant arm of this galaxy, there is a small blue planet. The beings who live there call themselves humans. They are young. They are fragile. They will seem weak to you. The voice paused, and when it continued, there was something new in its tone. Something that sounded almost like fear. Do not destroy humanity. Do not conquer them. Do not harm them. Leave them alone. If you do not heed this warning, you will learn the truth that we learned too late. Humans do not surrender. Humans do not forget. And humans do not forgive. If you make them your enemy, you will never escape their wrath. They will hunt you across every star. They will chase you to the end of time itself. And they will not stop until everything you have built is ash. The message ended. Silence filled the council chamber. Then Thaxrin laughed. It was a harsh sound, full of contempt. The Aelthori were fools, mystics and dreamers. They probably destroyed themselves with their own foolishness. And now we are supposed to fear a species that cannot even travel faster than light? Other council members joined her laughter. Vorthax allowed himself a small smile. The Aelthori had been powerful, yes, but they were gone. The Kethvari remained. That was all that mattered. The archivist is dismissed, Vorthax said. We will proceed with the vote. All in favor of exterminating the humans? 12 hands rose. It is decided. I will lead the invasion fleet personally. We leave in 3 cycles. The archivist backed out of the chamber, still clutching the crystal. As the doors closed behind her, she looked down at the small purple light in her hand. The Aelthori had been the wisest beings ever to exist. They had seen the future itself. And they had been afraid of humans. She wondered if the council was making a terrible mistake. Far across the galaxy, on the small blue planet called Earth, humanity went about its daily life. They did not know that they had been sentenced to death. They did not know that an alien empire was preparing to erase them from existence. They worked and played and loved and fought, just as they always had. But deep in human history, there were stories. Stories of small tribes defeating great empires. Stories of occupied peoples rising against their conquerors. Stories of the weak becoming strong and the strong being brought low. The Kethvari had studied human technology. They had studied human biology. They had studied human military capability. They had not studied human history. If they had, they might have noticed a pattern. Every great power that had tried to crush humanity had eventually fallen. Every tyrant who had declared humans defeated had eventually been proven wrong. Somehow, some way, humans always survived. They always adapted, and they always remembered. The invasion fleet began to assemble. 12,000 warships gathered in the darkness, their weapons charged, their crews eager for another easy victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The sky above Mars turned white with light as 12,000 Kethvari warships dropped out of hyperspace. They appeared all at once, a wall of metal and fire that blocked out the stars. Each ship was a weapon of destruction, armed with plasma cannons that could melt mountains and bombs that could crack continents. Admiral Vorthax stood on the bridge of the eternal silence, watching the human colonies below. Mars had been transformed over 2 centuries of human work. Great domed cities dotted its surface. Factories and farms stretched across the red soil. Millions of humans lived and worked there, unaware that death had come for them. Human fleet detected, one of his officers reported. 212 vessels. They are moving to intercept. Vorthax almost laughed. 200 ships against 12,000. The humans were either brave or stupid. Perhaps both. Let them come, he said. Show them what happens to insects who challenge the Dominion. The battle lasted 6 hours. It was not really a battle at all. It was a slaughter. Human ships were fast and their pilots were skilled, but their weapons barely scratched Kethvari shields. One by one, the human vessels were torn apart. Explosions lit up the void like dying stars. Escape pods were shot down without mercy. By the end, not a single human ship remained. Vorthax watched the destruction with cold satisfaction. Begin the bombardment of their orbital stations, then broadcast our terms to Earth. The great space stations that humanity had built over generations were reduced to rubble in minutes. The International Space Hub, which had taken 50 years to construct, burned like a candle in the darkness. The lunar shipyards, where humanity had dreamed of reaching distant stars, became nothing but floating debris. On Earth, people watched the sky and saw their future dying. The Kethvari broadcast was simple: surrender immediately and unconditionally, or the planet would be destroyed. Every human city would be burned. Every human being would be killed. There would be no negotiation. There would be no mercy. They had 1 hour to decide. The governments of Earth gathered in emergency sessions. Military leaders argued for resistance. Scientists pleaded for time. Religious figures prayed for miracles. But in the end, there was no choice. Humanity had nothing left to fight with. Earth surrendered. The occupation began the next day. Kethvari troops landed in every major city. They were tall and powerful, covered in scales that could stop bullets, armed with weapons that could vaporize a human in an instant. They took control of governments and militaries, They shut down communication networks. They established curfews and checkpoints. Humans who resisted were killed immediately. Humans who cooperated were allowed to live, but only as servants. The Kethvari needed workers to mine resources and build equipment. Slaves were useful. Free beings were not. Vorthax established his headquarters in what had once been called New York City. He sat in a tower that overlooked the ruined skyline, pleased with how quickly humanity had broken. Other species had fought longer. Other species had shown more spirit. Humans, it seemed, were even weaker than he had expected. The pacification is complete, he reported to the High Council. Earth is ours. The humans are fully under control. They work. They obey. They do not resist. This was perhaps our easiest conquest. The council was pleased. The Aelthori warning had been nonsense. Just as they expected. Humans were nothing special. They were just another species, now added to the long list of those the Dominion had crushed. But not everyone was convinced. Siltara was a junior xenologist assigned to study human behavior. She spent her days watching humans in their camps and workplaces, recording their actions, trying to understand how they thought, and she had noticed something that troubled her. The other conquered species had shown certain patterns after defeat. They mourned. They fought among themselves. They fell into despair. Their societies collapsed from within, making them easier to control. Humans were different. They did not mourn, at least not where Kethvari could see them. They did not fight each other. They worked quietly and efficiently, doing whatever tasks they were given. They kept their heads down and their mouths shut. But Siltara saw their eyes. And in those eyes, she did not see defeat. She saw patience. She saw calculation. She saw something that looked very much like waiting. One day, while inspecting a destroyed human library, she found a book that had survived the bombing. It was old and worn, written in a human language she had learned to read. The title translated roughly to A History of Resistance Movements. She read it in one sitting. And when she finished, her scales had gone pale with fear. The book told stories of human groups who had been conquered by other humans. It described how they had pretended to accept defeat while secretly building strength. It explained tactics called guerrilla warfare and sabotage and assassination. It showed how small groups of determined fighters had brought down empires many times larger than themselves. The humans had a word for this kind of resistance. They called it the long game. Siltara brought her concerns to Admiral Vorthax. She showed him the book. She explained what she had observed. She begged him to increase security, to watch the humans more carefully, to take the Aelthori warning seriously. Vorthax listened with growing impatience. When she finished, he threw the book aside. "You have been among the primitives too long," he said. "You are starting to think like them. These are slaves. They are broken. They pose no threat. Return to your studies and do not waste my time again." Siltara left his office knowing she had failed. She also knew, with growing certainty, that the Admiral was wrong. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in tunnels that no Kethvari scanner had detected, humans were already meeting. They were soldiers and scientists, engineers and teachers. They had lost everything, but they had not lost hope. "We cannot fight them directly," said General Maria Santos, who had commanded the defense of South America. "Not yet, but we can learn. We can prepare. We can wait." A young engineer named David Chen stepped forward. He held a piece of Kethvari technology, salvaged from a crashed scout ship. "Their weapons are advanced, but not magical. Given time, we can understand them. Given time, we can copy them. Given time, we can make them better." The room was silent. Everyone knew what they were agreeing to. Not a war of months or years, but a war of decades, perhaps generations, a war their children might have to finish. "Then we begin," Santos said. "Today, now, we build, we learn, we remember every atrocity they commit, and when the time is right, we make them pay for all of it." Above ground, the Kethvari celebrated their easy victory. Below ground, humanity began to plan their revenge. 50 years had passed since the Kethvari conquered Earth. To the alien overlords, the occupation was a complete success. Humans worked in their factories and mines. Humans served in their households. Humans obeyed every command without question. The Dominion had declared humanity fully integrated and moved on to other concerns. They did not see what was happening beneath the surface. Commander Elena Santos was 32 years old. She had never known freedom. She had been born in a work camp, raised under Kethvari rule, and trained from childhood to smile and bow and pretend to be harmless. Her grandmother had been General Maria Santos, one of the founders of the resistance. Elena had never met her. The Kethvari had executed Maria when Elena was still a baby, but Maria's legacy lived on. The resistance she had helped create now spanned every continent on Earth, every colony on Mars, every settlement on the Moon. Thousands of cells operated independently, connected by coded messages and secret signals. They shared information, resources, and a single burning purpose. Elena walked through the streets of New Chicago, the rebuilt city that the Kethvari had constructed on the ruins of the old one. She wore the gray uniform of a domestic servant, her eyes properly lowered, her steps properly humble. She passed 3 Kethvari checkpoints without a second glance. The guards saw exactly what they expected to see. Another obedient slave going about her duties. They did not see the data chip hidden in her shoe. They did not see the knife strapped to her thigh. They did not see the hate burning in her heart. She entered a tall building near the city center. It housed the administrative offices of the regional governor, a Kethvari named Drexnar, who had personally ordered the deaths of over 50,000 humans. Elena had been assigned to clean his private quarters. She had been doing this job for 3 years, slowly earning trust, slowly waiting for the right moment. Today was that moment. Drexnar sat at his desk, reviewing reports on a holographic display. He barely looked up when Elena entered. Humans were invisible to him, just furniture that happened to move. "Clean the windows," he said, "and be quick about it." Elena bowed. "Yes, master." She moved toward the windows, passing close to his chair. Her hand slipped beneath her uniform. The knife came out smoothly, silently. She had practiced this movement 10,000 times. Drexnar never saw the blade. He only felt a sudden cold in his throat. And then nothing at all. Elena wiped the knife clean and returned it to its hiding place. She finished cleaning the windows, just as ordered. Then she walked out of the building, past the same checkpoints, wearing the same humble expression. By the time the body was discovered, she was 50 kilometers away. This was how the resistance fought. Not with armies and fleets, but with patience and precision. Kethvari officers died in their beds. Supply convoys vanished on mountain roads. Power plants mysteriously exploded. Communication arrays stopped working at the worst possible times. Each act was small. Each act was carefully planned to look like an accident. The Kethvari suspected sabotage, but they could never prove it. They could never find the people responsible. Humans all looked the same to them, and humans never betrayed each other, no matter how brutal the interrogation. Meanwhile, far from Earth, humanity's greatest secret was taking shape. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter had always been considered worthless by the Kethvari. Just rocks and ice, nothing valuable. They had never bothered to patrol it properly. They had never noticed the activity happening inside certain larger asteroids. Dr. James Okonkwo floated through the zero-gravity shipyard, checking the progress on the latest vessel. He was 73 years old, and he had spent the last 40 years of his life working on this project. When he had started, they had nothing but stolen tools and salvaged scraps. Now they had a fleet. 3,000 ships filled the hollowed-out asteroid. They were not pretty. They were built from whatever materials could be smuggled out of Kethvari facilities. Some were held together with welds that human engineers would have called creative, but they worked. They flew, and they carried weapons that the Kethvari had never imagined. "The new drive systems are installed," his assistant reported. "All ships are ready for faster-than-light travel." James allowed himself a small smile. This was the breakthrough that had taken 30 years to achieve. The Kethvari thought their hyperspace technology was impossible to copy. They thought humans were too primitive to understand its principles. They were wrong. Human scientists had not just copied Kethvari technology. They had improved it. The new drives were faster, more efficient, and most importantly, completely undetectable by Kethvari sensors. But the weapons were the real achievement. Deep in another hidden facility, researchers had discovered something that Kethvari considered mythical, a way to disrupt FTL travel, a field that would trap ships in normal space, unable to escape, unable to call for help. When the time came, the Kethvari fleet above Earth would be caught in a cage of their own making. Back on Earth, Siltara had grown old. She was now the senior xenologist for the entire occupation zone, responsible for monitoring human behavior across all settlements. And she was more frightened than ever. The numbers did not add up. Despite 50 years of occupation, the human population had not decreased as expected. Birth rates remained stable. Workforce productivity exceeded projections. Disease and malnutrition were lower than they should have been. Someone was helping the humans. Someone was organizing them. Someone was keeping them strong. She presented her findings to the current High Admiral, a younger officer named Krixtal, who had replaced Vorthax after his natural death 10 years ago. "The humans are planning something," she said. "I have documented over 300 unexplained deaths of Kethvari personnel in the past decade. I have found evidence of secret communication networks. I have detected anomalies in resource consumption that suggest hidden manufacturing." Krixtal waved his hand dismissively. "You have been saying this for 50 years, xenologist. Your predecessor, Vorthax, ignored you, and he was right to do so. The humans are controlled. They are contained. They are no threat. The Elthori warning is ancient superstition. Leave me. I have actual work to do." Siltara left, knowing that she had failed again. The Kethvari saw what they wanted to see. A conquered species, broken and obedient. They could not imagine that humans were capable of planning across generations. They could not conceive of a hatred so deep that parents would pass it to their children. Who would pass it to their children? Who would pass it to their children? That night, in 10,000 homes across Earth, Mars, and Luna, humans gathered in secret. They lit candles and spoke names. The names of everyone who had died in the invasion. Everyone who had been killed during the occupation. Everyone who had sacrificed themselves for the cause. Elena Santos spoke her grandmother's name. Dr. Okonkwo spoke the names of colleagues who had died in hidden laboratories. Farmers spoke the names of children taken for experiments. Workers spoke the names of friends executed for minor offenses. They remembered everything. They forgot nothing, and they waited. In the asteroid shipyard, the 3,000th ship was completed. Its hull was painted with a human word, a word that had been banned by the Kethvari, a word that no human had spoken aloud in 50 years. The word was freedom. The day of liberation was coming, and when it arrived, the galaxy would learn why the Aelthori had been afraid. The clock struck midnight on Earth. It was the first day of the 51st year of occupation, and across 3 worlds, humanity moved as one. Elena Santos stood in the control room of an underground bunker, watching holographic displays that showed every human settlement under Kethvari control. Green lights blinked on, one after another, each light representing a resistance cell reporting ready. 10,000 lights, 10,000 teams, millions of people who had waited their entire lives for this moment. "All cells confirmed," her communications officer reported. "We are ready." Elena took a deep breath. Her grandmother had started this. Her mother had continued it. Now she would finish it. "Send the signal. Liberation begins now." A single pulse traveled through hidden transmitters across Earth, Mars, and the Moon. It was a simple signal. Just 3 words in old human code. Remember. Rise. Revenge. The effect was immediate. In New Chicago, a human servant approached the main power station with a basket of cleaning supplies. The guards waved her through without inspection. They had seen her every day for years. They did not notice the explosive charges hidden beneath the rags. 10 minutes later, the station exploded, and the entire city went dark. In the Mars colony of Olympus City, 30 human workers in the Kethvari garrison suddenly turned on their masters. They had been trusted servants, given access to weapons lockers and vehicle bays. The garrison commander died before he understood what was happening. His last thought was confusion. The humans had always been so obedient. On Luna, hidden EMP devices activated inside every major Kethvari communication hub. The devices had been placed years ago, disguised as ordinary equipment, waiting patiently for this moment. In an instant, the entire Kethvari command network went silent. Admiral Krixtal was asleep when the alarm started. He stumbled to the bridge of his flagship, demanding reports, receiving only chaos. His communication officers could not reach any ground stations. His sensor operators reported impossible readings. His tactical displays showed his own ships attacking each other. "What is happening?" he screamed. "Why can't I reach anyone?" A junior officer approached, his scales pale with fear. "Admiral, we are detecting a large fleet emerging from the asteroid belt. 3,000 vessels. They appear to be human. Impossible. Humans don't have ships. Humans can't travel faster than light. They are using FTL, Admiral? And they are heading directly toward us." Krixtal ordered his fleet to prepare for battle. He had 8,000 warships in orbit around Earth, more than enough to crush any opposition. But when he gave the order to engage, nothing happened as expected. The human ships did not fight like any enemy the Kethvari had faced. They were fast, faster than should have been possible for vessels of their size. They moved in coordinated swarms, attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. Their weapons punched through Kethvari shields like they were made of paper. And then the trap was sprung. A strange energy field expanded across the battlefield. It shimmered like an aurora, beautiful and deadly. Krixtal's navigation officer screamed a warning that came too late. "Admiral, our hyperspace drives are offline. We cannot jump." The Kethvari fleet was trapped. They could not escape. They could not call for reinforcements. They could only fight or die. Most of them died. The battle lasted 72 hours. When it ended, 8,000 Kethvari warships had been reduced to burning wreckage. The human fleet had lost 400 ships. The mathematics of death had finally been reversed. On the surface of Earth, the uprising was equally devastating. Every Kethvari garrison faced simultaneous attacks from enemies who knew every weakness, every patrol route, every security code. Humans who had pretended to be harmless for 50 years revealed themselves as trained soldiers. Weapons that had been hidden in walls and floors and underground caches were finally used. The Kethvari fought back with typical brutality. They executed hostages. They burned cities. They used every terrible weapon in their arsenal. But for every human they killed, 10 more appeared. The resistance had planned for losses. They had planned for atrocities. They had planned for everything. By the end of the third day, Kethvari control over Earth had collapsed. The alien occupiers were dead, captured, or fleeing for their lives. Elena Santos walked through the ruins of New Chicago as the sun rose on a free Earth for the first time in half a century. The city was burning. Bodies lay in the streets, both human and Kethvari. The cost of liberation had been terrible, but they had won. High above, the human fleet surrounded a single Kethvari cruiser. This ship had been deliberately spared, allowed to survive while its companions burned. On board was Silterra, the old xenologist who had tried so many times to warn her people. Commander Elena Santos appeared on the cruiser's communication screen. Her face was hard, her eyes cold. "You are being allowed to leave. Return to your dominion. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that we remember every world they burned, every species they destroyed, every atrocity they committed." Silterra nodded slowly. "What else should I tell them? Tell them we are coming. Tell them we will find every world they control. Tell them we will free every species they have enslaved. And tell them this, xenologist. Tell them exactly this." Elena leaned forward, and her voice became something ancient and terrible. The voice of a species that had been pushed to the edge of extinction and refused to fall. "We remember. We are coming, and we will never stop." The Kethvari cruiser jumped to hyperspace, carrying its message of doom across the galaxy. On Earth, humans emerged from hiding places they had used for 50 years. They climbed out of underground shelters and walked out of secret tunnels. They looked up at a sky that no longer held enemy ships. They breathed air that belonged to them again, and they began to rebuild. But even as construction crews cleared rubble and doctors treated the wounded, military planners were already looking outward. The war was not over. The Kethvari Dominion still existed. Hundreds of other species still suffered under their rule. Humanity had freed itself. Now it was time to free everyone else. Dr. James Okonkwo, old and tired but still alive, addressed the new human assembly 3 months after Liberation Day. His voice was broadcast to every settlement on 3 worlds. "We have won our freedom," he said, "but we cannot stop here. The universe is full of others who suffer as we suffered, others who dream of liberation as we dreamed, others who wait for someone to help them as we waited." He paused, looking out at the faces of humans who had never known anything but occupation, humans who had fought and bled and died for this moment. "We will be that help. We will bring justice to every corner of the galaxy. Not revenge, but justice. We will show the universe that humanity is not a plague to be feared, but a light to be followed." The assembly rose to its feet, cheering. Ships were already being built. Soldiers were already being trained. The human expansion had begun, and somewhere in the vast archives of a dead civilization, the Ailthori's warning echoed through the empty halls. They had seen this moment 1,000,000 years ago. They had known what humanity would become. The Kethvari should have listened. 200 years had passed since Liberation Day. The universe had changed beyond recognition. The human alliance now controlled more territory than the Kethvari Dominion had held at its peak. Human ships patrolled 1,000 systems. Human colonies spread across 3 galaxies. Human technology had surpassed anything the galaxy had ever seen, but it was not their power that made the other species of the universe respect humanity. It was their memory. Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the HSS Remembrance, the largest warship ever constructed. Behind him stretched the combined human fleet, 200,000 vessels, each one carrying the names of those who had died during the occupation. Every ship was a memorial. Every crew member knew exactly why they were here. They had reached Kethvar, the homeworld of the Dominion. The planet hung in the darkness like a pale green jewel, protected by the last of the Kethvari fleet. Barely 5,000 ships, all that remained of the empire that had once ruled the universe. A communication request appeared on the display. Marcus accepted it. The face that appeared was old, wrinkled, the scales faded with age. High Patriarch Vex Tral, the last leader of the Kethvari Dominion, looked out with eyes that held no hope. "You have won," Vextral said. "Our empire is finished. Our colonies are liberated. Our armies are destroyed. What more do you want?" Marcus thought about his great-great-grandmother, Elena Santos, who had led the uprising on Earth. He thought about the millions who had died in the occupation. He thought about the 10,000 species the Kethvari had destroyed before humanity even existed. "We want justice," he said simply. "Then take our lives, destroy our world, end us as we ended so many others." Marcus shook his head. "That is not justice, that is revenge. Humanity does not destroy civilizations. We are not like you." The old Kethvari seemed confused. "Then what will you do?" "We will hold you accountable. Every Kethvari leader who ordered atrocities will face trial. Every record of every crime will be examined. The innocent will be spared. The guilty will pay. And your species will live. Not as conquerors, but as equals among the many peoples of the universe. You would spare us? After everything we did?" Marcus leaned forward. "The humans your ancestors conquered had every reason to become monsters. They chose not to. They passed that choice to their children, and their children passed it to us. We remember everything the Dominion did. We remember the burning cities and the mass graves. We remember the families torn apart and the species erased from existence. We remember it all." His voice softened, but lost none of its strength. "And we choose to be better. Not for your sake, but for ours. Revenge would make us what you were. Justice makes us what we want to be." The Kethvari fleet stood down. Vextral surrendered himself for trial. The war that had begun with the destruction of human civilization ended with the salvation of the civilization that had tried to destroy it. The trials lasted for decades. Thousands of Kethvari leaders faced judgment for their crimes. The evidence was overwhelming. Records from human archives, testimony from survivors, data recovered from Kethvari systems that documented every atrocity in precise detail. Humans had remembered everything. Every name, every death, every act of cruelty. Those found guilty faced sentences that fit their crimes. Some were executed. Others spent the rest of their lives in prison. A few, those who had shown mercy or helped human resistance movements, were freed with warnings. Siltara, the xenologist who had tried to warn the Dominion, was brought before the tribunal not as a criminal, but as a witness. She was ancient now, over 300 years old, kept alive by human medicine that the Kethvari had never developed. Why did you try to warn them? Judge Liu asked. You gained nothing from it. They ignored you. Siltara thought for a long moment before answering. Because I understood what my people could not. I read human history. I saw the patterns. I knew that you were different from every other species the Dominion had faced. Different how? Other species gave up. They accepted defeat. They let themselves be absorbed into the Dominion and forgot who they were. The old Kethvari looked around the courtroom, at the human faces watching her, at the symbols of human civilization that now dominated the galaxy. Humans never forgot. You carried your hatred like a sacred flame, passing it from generation to generation. And when the moment came, you burned us with it. Does that frighten you? Siltara smiled, a strange expression on her alien face. It did once. Now I understand that your memory is not just about hatred. You remember the good as well as the bad. You remember those who helped you. You remember kindness as well as cruelty. That is why you are building a better universe instead of a bloodier one. The tribunal released her with honors. She spent her remaining years teaching at human universities, helping young humans understand the species their ancestors had defeated. But the greatest discovery was yet to come. At the edge of the known universe, human explorers found something that should not have existed. A structure older than stars, built by hands that had shaped galaxies. The HFY archive. Marcus Chen, now retired from the military, was among the first to enter. He walked through halls that had been silent for 1,000,000 years, past machines that still hummed with ancient power, past records of civilizations that had risen and fallen long before Earth's sun was born. At the center of the archive, a light appeared. It took no physical form, but somehow Marcus knew he was in the presence of something vast and old and wise. We are the HFY, the light said, speaking directly into his mind. We have waited for you. Marcus stood still, overwhelmed by the presence. The warning about humanity. You left it almost 1,000,000 years ago. How did you know? We saw all possible futures. We watched 1,000 galaxies evolve. We witnessed the rise and fall of countless species, and we searched for something specific. A people who could inherit what we had built. Inherit? The light seemed to smile. If something without a face could smile. We did not vanish. We evolved. We became beings of pure thought, no longer bound by physical form. But we could not take our knowledge with us. We needed someone to carry it forward. Images filled Marcus's mind. Technologies beyond anything humanity had imagined. Maps of the entire universe. Solutions to problems that would take humans millions of years to solve on their own. We tested every species we found. We gave warnings, challenges, opportunities. Most failed. The Kethvari failed. They were strong but not wise. They conquered but did not grow. They would have used our knowledge to destroy rather than create. And humanity, you were different. You faced extinction and chose survival. You endured oppression and chose freedom. You achieved victory and chose justice. You passed every test we could devise. The light grew brighter, warmer, more welcoming. The universe is yours now, not to conquer, but to nurture. Not to rule, but to guide. You have proven that you can face the darkness and remain who you are. That is the rarest gift in all of existence. Marcus thought about the long journey that had brought humanity to this moment. The invasion that had nearly destroyed them. The 50 years of occupation. The uprising. The expansion. The choice to seek justice instead of revenge. We will try to be worthy of this trust, he said. You already are. That is why we chose you. The HFY shared their knowledge with humanity. Not all at once, but gradually. As humans proved ready to handle each new revelation, humanity spread across the universe, not as conquerors, but as protectors. They found other species, younger and weaker, and helped them grow. They guarded the galaxy against threats from beyond known space. And they remembered, every year, on Liberation Day, humans across the universe paused to speak the names of those who had died, the names of soldiers and scientists, of resistance fighters and ordinary people who had refused to surrender. The names of those who had sacrificed everything so that their children might be free. The Kethvari had been right about one thing. Humans never forgot, but they had been wrong about what that meant. Human memory was not just about hatred and revenge. It was about honor and gratitude, about learning from the past and building a better future. The universe had tried to destroy humanity. Instead, humanity had inherited the universe, and somewhere in the infinite expanse of space, the light of the Aelthori watched and smiled. They had made the right choice. The children of Earth would carry their legacy forward, not for years or centuries, but for eternity. The warning had been fulfilled, the inheritance had been claimed, and humanity's greatest story was just beginning.